Well, it's that time of the year. The NHL trade deadline is this week. It's only 3 days away. It's crazy. Snuck up on us. You know who else snuck up on us is the St. Louis Blues. They have been hot lately. They've made their way back into the playoff race, vaulted themselves into within a stone's throw of the playoffs. Their hot streak is also somewhat complicated. Their approach and their outlook to the trade deadline, though. So should they capitalize on the current moment and become buyers this week? Should they stick with what was probably going to be their plan and sell in some regard? Should they stand pat, just keep rolling out what they've got? Which players could be in play for the Blues to move, and what should they look to accomplish this week? We're going to talk about all that and more on this episode of Note News. Yeah, man. Like I said, trade deadline snuck up on us. It is this Friday, March 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so 2 p.m. Central. It came fast after Four
hmm
Nations, obviously, but I think I thought it would take longer. I thought it would feel longer, but the Four Nations face off turned out to be so fun that I think it just sort of sped on by. But um, we talked on Sunday about the Blues hot streak. So if you missed that episode and want to tune into a fun one, then be sure to check that out. We are doing another one a little bit sooner than we typically do, just because of the Blues schedule this week. And like I said, the upcoming trade deadline at the end of the week. We're going to talk about all that today. But before we do, we're John and Alec with you as always. We're Note News, a St. Louis Blues podcast. We go live twice a week here on YouTube. Um, so be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, especially. It's the best way to help us out. Almost to 300, so help us clear that hurdle. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like audio, you can follow and rate wherever you're listening. And you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, all at Note News Pod, where we post a lot of other great stuff. So be sure to follow along with us on all those platforms. But Alec, the streak is officially over. The Blues lost finally. It had to end sometime, but they lost 6-3 to the Dallas Stars on Sunday night. How did you feel about that game? Like, I don't, obviously we don't want to overreact to one loss after it's been going so well for so long, but like, are you at all concerned after that game? Do you have any major takeaways from that game against Dallas on Sunday?
Actually, I think my takeaways for a 6-3 loss are really positive. Weirdly
Yeah.
enough, I think they really showed that they can fight and they can kind of hang with one of the best teams in their division and in their conference. Um, Absolutely, I was really, in my opinion, I think we actually outplayed the Dallas Stars. It's just the
Oh
puck
yeah.
bounced the other way, and that'll happen. And they did win the game, so you could say it's not fair to say we outplayed them, but it's fair to say at least that we played up to them. And yeah, it made me really hopeful for what they're building for the remainder of this season and going into next. I'm super excited essentially to watch how this team can grow and develop after continuing to play some really good hockey. I think this is again just like setting the expectation that we can expect to see some really competitive games, and I think that's super cool. And the final score is not at all indicative of the level that was played that night. I mean, there was one empty netter plus like just some overall garbage time, like whatever goals. I really do think that the Blues outplayed the Stars, just not on the score sheet.
Yeah.
And even if you say they didn't outplay them, I think they played up to them for sure. And the Dallas Stars are considered cup contenders,
Mhm.
so like that is the level of hockey that we're watching right now. And they didn't get the job done, obviously. And if they're going to want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win a lot of those tough games. But either way, this is making me super excited for next season, if anything else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would totally agree. I think the Blues did outplay them. I mean, you look at I mean, yeah, like you said, obviously they lost the game and so they didn't technically outplay them, but you look at the they outplayed them in the sense of like the on ice play itself. You look at like the expected goals metrics, they were outpacing them literally the entire game. They finished with 4.13 expected goals to Dallas's 3.04. Uh, and it was just, yeah, like Justin said in the chat, four power play goals. I think the issue here was taking too many penalties, and then you
Yeah.
know the goaltending we got was a little shaky. Hofer didn't look too great, but really it was just an unlucky game. And I don't think it's super indicative of who this team is, because the offense still scored 3 goals, and that is what has been carrying them, and what I expect to continue to carry them if they can keep this up. It was just tough to see it all kind of fall in on one game with the goaltending and the bad luck and taking too many penalties, and then the PK not performing like you'd hoped it would and like it has been. So definitely rough. But look, the hot streak has been more than just the win streak, right? The win streak is over, but you look back, they got, what was it, like 11 out of a possible 12 points in the 6 games prior to that. So the like I said, the hot streak has been a more extended period, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if that continues. Starting what is it, tomorrow against LA? So really, I think it is a bummer to see them lose to Dallas. If they had won, they would be in a playoff spot right now. But I think they'll be fine. I think it'll be okay. But why don't we go ahead and talk about trade deadline stuff? Tis the season for the NHL trade deadline. It's Friday, March 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, like I said a little bit earlier. But it's been pretty eventful so far. There's been some big moves. Mikko Rantanen to Carolina, JT Miller to New York, and then obviously Seth Jones to the Florida Panthers was sort of the more recent big one. What else? Trent Frederick
Yeah, as of
today
today.
to the Oilers. So did you see that? That tweet that was like, the Oilers are looking for a forward
Yes.
with size and speed and like a
Yes.
reliable defenseman? It's like,
Yes.
would it help if they were really young and cheap too? Oh man,
It's a good thing that they had Cody Ceci though.
good thing.
For
Good thing.
their plan.
Oh yeah, but you look at also what St. Louis has accomplished so far this season with trades and moves. They acquired Cam Fowler. That's pretty much the big one. P.O. Joseph traded away to the Pens, and then Scotty P traded to the New York Islanders. Brandon Saad, sort of, not really a trade, but a roster move that was kind of a bigger one, I think you'd say. But what what grade would you give the Blues so far based on what they've done to this point?
There's definitely been, I think, a lot more positive than negative. And I think the big one is Cam Fowler. The Cam Fowler move alone for how the Blues have approached trades this season is just a huge, huge plus. It's really inarguable to call it anything else, that you could find, not have to give up too much for your top line D pair that really stabilized the rotation. Checking in on Scott Perunovich to the Islanders. I believe last time we checked, he had, I want to say 9 games played. Maybe it was more like 7 or 8. He is at 9 games played with 3 points in those games. So scored 2 points in his first game with the Islanders. Everyone said, oh boy, here we go again. St. Louis releasing talent to be talent elsewhere. And here we are. It's just, so yeah, getting anything for Perunovich. And then, I guess, releasing Joseph is not really much. And Brandon Saad, cleared space. Didn't really get anything in return, but there, I guess, just was nothing out there. So in terms of a grade, it's all been positive, but it also hasn't been enough to put this team over the top. So really, I think it is sort of a baseline pass for any season. And when I think about it that way, I think I have to give it probably a B, probably maybe B plus, maybe B minus, but somewhere in the range of a B.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would lean the exact same way. I think they get a big bump for how effective Cam Fowler has been and how well that has worked out. He's, the man looks good in blue, and he has played so good and carved himself a role here in St. Louis. And has really helped the blue line round out in a really great way. Yeah, and then it was sort of getting stale, right? And so moving out P.O. Joseph, Scott Perunovich, you give more time to like a Tyler Tucker who has also carved himself out a role. That has worked out relatively well. Um, I think I would lean B plus as well. I think based on the moves that they've done, like I wouldn't dock them really, but it's like, could you have done more? Is sort of the other half of that. And I think with the Brandon Saad thing, I find it hard to believe that they couldn't have found a trade. Maybe if they had waited till I don't know if they had
Yeah.
done this yet, but maybe if they had waited till like the cap projections came out, or I don't know something, because his contract wasn't that big and there wasn't that much that much term left in it. So we both found it pretty surprising that they couldn't get anything in exchange. Maybe they just weren't willing to eat salary. Like I don't know what it was, but I think they could have done something other than that. This is sort of the second best scenario is a contract termination, but um, still, I think they could have done a little bit more to this point. But um, B, yeah, I think we can lean B right now. But um, why don't we talk? What's to come here? We've got 3 days left. It's crunch time, and it's confusing because we thought we knew what the Blues were, and then we were wrong. And then what we thought the Blues were at that point, we've been wrong again. Like we thought they would be in the wild card race at first, and then they fell out of it, and we were like, they're not, tank. Some people were calling for a tank, and here they are, 1 point out of the playoffs. They have come all the way back, but that makes things a little more complicated, right? They have been hot, but will it affect their trade deadline plans? We talked a lot of, uh, about a lot of other facets of the rest of the season on our last episode, but what are your thoughts on the trade deadline? Like, how do you think this resurgence and this fantastic, really fantastic hockey that we've seen from them lately, how do you think it'll affect their plans this week for the trade deadline?
I really don't think it will have a ton of effect, and I think it came 2 games too late. I think
Yeah,
if they had started it like a game or two before, or if they had won at Dallas, probably they would need one more, I think, win to really be firmly in the playoff race. But I mean, they'll be in the race.
yeah,
But I really don't think I would expect this team to be major buyers or even major players in the trade market. The only way in which I think that this has affected um, the only way that I think this has affected the Blues' plans is I think that they might sell less and or probably stand pat. And honestly, given how good they've been playing, probably standing pat is the right call here. At least if I were running, perhaps this is spoilers for later in the episode, but if I were GM on the St. Louis Blues, I would not make any moves at the deadline at this point. This team is firing in all cylinders. I don't really know that you're going to get like a franchise future changing asset. Why not let him ride it out? Maybe still a soft sell could be in order, and I think that'd be fine. But I just don't really know that you have the draft capital, or I don't know that you want to be giving up prospects to get like
yeah, yeah.
forward pieces. And or I don't really know that they're going to be looking to majorly sell here. Sidebar, where does Stan Pat come from? Who is Pat? But anyways, how would how about you? How has your perspective changed?
Yeah, I think
I'm gonna look that up.
what this hot streak has done. Yeah, let us know what you find, Alec. I think what this hot streak has done is made it so that any of these three paths, right? Buying, selling, standing pat, like they wouldn't be that surprising. And I don't think that many people would be upset with whatever path they choose. Like it kind of makes sense with whichever they choose. I can see an argument for each of these. So I think this sort of brings us maybe to our next point, um, because we'll talk about what we think they'll do and what they should do. A little bit of a teaser there, and here in a second. But um, I think first we should make the case for these three options: for buying, for selling, and for standing pat. Um, any results so far on where Standing Pat comes from?
Yeah, so nothing. I found several results, which is weird. So according to Wikipedia, the term is first to been used in a political context by Joseph G. Cannon in 1896 with regard to U.S. tariffs, and that
Okay.
all we needed to do was to stand to Wiktionary. Pat was probably a poker phrase equaling to optimal, meaning that drawing more cards would be unnecessary. And according to OED, what is this? Oxford Online Dictionary, I think. The term was first recognized, Oxford English Dictionary Online, first recognized in 1893, again, by the Rocky Mountain News in Denver as a political term for essentially maintaining status quo. So politics somewhere, but
All right.
the
Maybe some
mysterious
poker in
Pat
there.
individual has never been identified.
All right. Well,
Back to hockey.
back to hockey. So why don't we start with buying? I think this is sort of the easy one and the one that a lot of people are thinking about. But making the case for the Blues to buy, I can take this one, unless you want to take buying.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think obviously the Blues are hot. Vibes have not been this high all season long. Maybe that would be most true before the Dallas loss, but really they are closer to the playoffs than they have been in a long time. It seems like a more realistic dream than it has in a little while. Really going back to last season when they were in it, right up to the end, but it's been a while and vibes are high, and they're playing the best hockey that we've seen them play all season in this stretch. They are, they're getting solid player performances from the likes of Robert Thomas. Pavel Buchnevich is heating up. Colton Parayko looks fantastic. Dylan Holloway is amazing. Philip Broberg is amazing as well. So you're getting these performances to line up at the same time, and it looks special. The offense is fantastic. The defense is fantastic. Bennington has been good in the past few weeks or past couple of weeks, and there's a case to be made that they should capitalize on that. Hockey is a business, and the Blues, as like a franchise, pretty badly need to make the playoffs. Like, whether or not we think they should be going all in, like, they want to make the playoffs, and they feel the pressure of missing for another year. And I think that pressure is very real, and I think that we could see Doug Armstrong feel that pressure in a very real way and look to acquire some more assets and see if we can put together a run of some sort. I think also there is, as we've talked about a lot here, so much value, to be gained from like a playoff run, especially for a team like the Blues who is retooling, rebuilding. Like, there is a lot of value that can come from a playoff chase, of being in it, feeling like the lights are bright, the pressure is on, and seeing how your players perform under that kind of pressure, especially the young guys. They get that experience of high leverage games, of important games, and an extended period of important games, right? It's sort of like a playoff chase is similar in some regards to a playoff run. Once you're in, games matter, and seeing how these young players perform under those bright lights, and giving them that experience to get used to some of those high pressure, high leverage situations is really valuable in their development. And so I think there is something to be said for capitalizing on the current moment, and maybe not like selling off the future to do it, but acquiring a little something to make make your playoff chances more real. I don't know. What do you think, Alec? Do you see any merit in that argument?
I certainly see merit. That, like, yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's mostly a question of what we have and what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, I think this will be a very active trade market. I think, given the cap going up, that we've already seen some blockbuster moves, and there's still some pieces on the market, potentially with even more that could be sold. I actually do think that this is going to be a pretty active trade market, which would give credence to the idea that the Blues could be could certainly be a player in that market. And definitely I get the point about like trying to get these guys experience, and absolutely I would love if they made the playoffs. It's mostly just the Blues right now have very limited draft capital and are probably going to look to restock that before spending from it more. In this upcoming draft, they have 3 picks, a first, a fifth, and a sixth. So you're already giving from next year's draft, which you have all of your picks except for a second, plus 2 extra fifths. So there is some stockpiling there. But again, we've talked so much about how this offseason might be the window for them to really be looking into major trades or anything.
For sure.
And giving up like even a third to acquire a rental. That's like a kind of significant draft piece considering how little capital that they have right now. Then the other options there would either be to give up young players or to give up young prospects. And that's always just a really dicey situation to be in. But I do actually think that if they're savvy about it, there could be some pieces that are worth flipping in deals like this. It's just, are you selling them or are you using them to buy? Because then obviously the return is very different. And I personally would rather be using them to sell, but if the right deal is there to buy, then, I'm listening, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And for what it's worth, while we are hypothetically making the case for all these different strategies, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we are sort of hitching our wagon to necessarily. But Alec, do you want to go ahead and take selling? Why don't you sell me this pen? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
All right. Sell me on selling.
Well, I'd rather not go to jail, but instead I'll talk about the NHL trade deadline. So I do think that selling is probably actually no. I was going to say is most likely. I don't know that it's most likely, but was definitely in the works, and now we'll see how they choose to go about it, and maybe this upcoming game against the Kings could determine some of that too. But selling is a very realistic outcome for this team. I really do believe at this point it is extremely unlikely that we see any major changes to the Blues. Now, that Armstrong quote is still somewhat relevant, that I think we brought up before about how if you want to see major changes, you have to go up the pecking order a little bit, hinting at a potential Schenn trade. But I really think at this point that's pretty unlikely, given how the team has played and given some of the comments of the players that have come out about Brayden Schenn. Like Ryan Suter has said that Brayden Schenn is sort of a reason that he actually wants to stick around playing hockey in St. Louis. And a lot of like older guys, especially talking about Brayden Schenn and his role on this team and the leadership that he brings, how essential he is. I really don't think a Schenn trade is likely. I don't think a Parayko trade is likely for just a billion different reasons.
Yeah.
And those are really the only two like major pieces that you could talk yourselves into. And I guess Buchnevich would be the other one, but I still think that's just a weird deal to work out right now. And I see it as unlikely unless you're getting like first round picks in return for Buch. And I don't know if you are at this point. Maybe could definitely happen, but I don't know that that's a guarantee. So really what I think is most likely if they sell, I think is that they would really sell on the margins for this team. Radek Faksa is a name that I've talked about before and is the piece that makes the most sense to sell on this team. Absolutely. Given contract, given he's an impending UFA, there's no clauses or anything. He's been playing his role really well this season. If someone is going on this team, my first guess would that it is Radek Faksa. Actually, Matt in the chat and I are right in lockstep. I was going to say Texier is another piece that he just hasn't really been getting playing time, and I really think it's likely, this is sort of what we saw with Scott Perunovich. Now, it's a little bit different because we had seen this for 2-3 years of Scott Perunovich not getting playing time and then kind of weirdly, getting implemented when he was in the rotation. Texier has only been with the team for like 60. We played 60 games. Yeah, so he's only been with the team for that long, but he's not getting the playing time. They don't necessarily need another forward on the roster. You can always call up like a Mackenzie McEachran or someone else from Springfield to eat some minutes if someone gets injured. So I do think Faxa and Texier are two guys that I would really be looking for. And for them, you're probably only recouping like mid to late round draft picks. Maybe Texier, because of his youth and potential, could get you, I don't know, a fourth might be a bit much, but probably like 4 through 7 range, or like a prospect that's like really a lottery ticket, which is really what you're going to be drafting with in a 4th through 7th round pick anyway. But I'd kind of rather have the pick over the prospect, because then it's the Blues guy that they get to choose versus someone else. Even though it is like they're still targeting another prospect, regardless. So I think if they sell, it really is likely going to be a soft sell of a depth roster piece. Could be, maybe like a Alexei Toropchenko could be on the move. Ryan Suter could be on the move. Wouldn't be unheard of, but I really don't think it's more than probably 2 players if I had to guess. And I don't think it's going to be any of like the big contracts at this point. Well, big with an asterisk, this isn't Mikko Rantanen we're talking about. There's, some discussion in the chat right now. I don't know that I would expect Leddy or Falk to go this trade deadline. It could happen, but I just really think with where the team is at, with where their cap is at, I really think that sort of finagling might come in the off season when they have more flexibility, that they don't have to stay within the cap limit restrictions and bring in a third team to make everything work out, as it were. I really would more expect to see these like fringe roster type guys, and probably leave the Leddys and the Falks, and we'll see what happens with Krug into the off season.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Leddy is unmovable. Falk, I like to think that they could find a home for him, but it definitely will be a lot easier in the offseason. And I think that's the more likely scenario is like you said, they would find him another home sometime in the offseason. But yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said for selling. Peter pointed out in the chat, great point. There's a lot of teams probably trying to buy more so than sellers in this market. You look at the wild card races in both conferences, they're pretty tight, and there are a lot of teams like theoretically in it. In the West, you've got obviously Colorado has that top one wrapped up, and if it's not them, then it's going to be LA or Minnesota. And
I mean, I think Colorado is vying for a divisional spot, to be honest.
Yeah, right. They can, and they're only two points behind Minnesota for the divisional spot. So like, if it isn't Colorado, it's going to be Minnesota. LA could fall out of it. They've only got 70, but Calgary or Vancouver would have to catch them, and that's probably not likely. So it'll probably wind up being Minnesota in that second wild card. Or in the first wild card, excuse me. And then in the second one, you've got Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis, Utah. Anaheim is like kind of in it. People are throwing them in it, but it's probably not going to be. That's probably not going to be the year for Anaheim. But then you look at the East, and that picture is changing every day. In the first wild card spot, you've got Columbus with 68. In the second, Detroit with 66. And then moving down the list, New York Rangers, 66. Ottawa Senators, 65. Montreal Canadiens, 65. Boston Bruins, 64. Philly, 62. New York, 61. So, like, there's a lot of teams that could convince themselves that they are still in this race. And if they were to buy, then, maybe that could just make the difference. And so I think Peter does have a good point that you could capitalize, as much as you would be capitalizing on the current moment by buying because you're hot, you could also just as equally capitalize on the current moment by selling while there are so many potential buyers out there. So I think that's another great point. And then, like you said, acquiring some futures could be hugely valuable. They don't have a lot of draft picks in the upcoming draft. Try and recoup some of that draft capital, stuff like that. And I mean, you'd really be setting this team up for success in the long run, like starting next season. Because look, man, they are close, and they keep showing that this season in a lot of different ways. And so I think selling again, like you said, maybe a softer sell, that could be the right move. But I think there is also something to be said for this third strategy, unless you have anything else on the selling point. We can go ahead and get into the standing pat, which might be what they end up doing. But do you want to go ahead and get into this one?
Yeah, I think let's do it.
Yeah, man. I mean, they have gotten back in the race after being, by all indications, out of it, and pretty firmly out of it. But they have gotten back into it by playing, I've said it a couple times already, fantastic hockey. As currently constructed, there have been a couple moves to shake things up a little: the Fowler trade, the Saad termination, and then a couple smaller trades. But I mean, really, the way you're currently constructed has gotten you back into this. And why would you want to mess with that by adding or subtracting too much? Also, on the point of like, should they sell or not? I mean, they don't have that many impending UFAs that you have to find a return for. It's not like you're losing out on a ton of value, and your impending UFAs aren't like big ticket guys, right? If you get anything back, it's not going to be much. Your key pieces are going to be coming back next year, and most of them are locked in for a long time. Robert Thomas, Kyrou, Shen, for a little while longer. Buchnevich just signed his extension, and then your young guys are going to be here a while. So you don't need to buy a whole lot mid-season, because I think a lot of the best work can be done in the off season. But they're also playing well enough at this point. We talked about the value of buying is that you are in a playoff race, and the value that comes with that, especially for your young developing players. Well, they're still kind of getting that value right now with how they're currently playing. They're in it without necessarily needing to buy, and I think if they can just sort of keep up this pace, that those benefits of buying could make their way into like the standing pat, because this team isn't far off. And with the cap going up so much after this season, the need to clear space isn't as great, and especially as great as it's been in the past. But really, I think for this team to be competitive in the long term, a lot of the work to be done is going to be in the off season. But I don't know. What do you have to add on the idea of standing pat?
Yeah, I just think it probably is the most likely option at this point, given just the weird nature of the season as we've seen so far. It would kind of make sense that if you're not really sure what direction you're going to go, to just let them play. And if they're already like making a push for the wild card, and buying is really like hard to make that case for, because this is all still building towards the future, towards something, their window is very clearly opening, but not yet open. So you really don't want to sacrifice that window. But selling might, put a damper on this season and maybe could have some further ramifications like going forward. So I really think it makes the most sense to probably let them ride it as they have their roster right now. I think recouping draft capital is valuable, but you're not recouping any significant draft capital with the guys in the roster you have currently. And it's really, up to a certain point, we kind of hope that some of it gets used to acquire NHL talent. So at that point, you could still give from future picks too. So it's not like you're really forced to do anything. And I really think it might be wise to do nothing, which sounds so strange and is such a unique place to be in as a franchise. But really, like, the West is going to have so many teams confident that they could win. I mean, I guess the Canucks have already traded JT Miller, but I don't know that they're still. The reports seem to seem like they're not selling more. The Flames are probably looking to add. Everyone currently in a playoff spot obviously is looking to add. So the Blues are kind of in a really fortunate position to where at this point, like, if they stay the course with what they've got, then they're kind of playing with house money, right? I mean, if they go on a playoff run, whether or not, like, say they go on a playoff run or they go on a wild card like chase and miss the playoffs, you know, they were still in it till the end. And sure, maybe that lessens their draft pick, but right now, even if the season ended right now, they would still have the chance at the 11th or 10th overall pick, I believe. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th. They'd be at the 12th overall pick. Getting those guys a chance to be in a playoff run, I think could build a lot of chemistry for this team. And if they make the playoffs, obviously that's a success. And if they fall out of the race and kind of go back to mediocrity, then at least we know, like, what pieces need to be moved and how this team needs to improve. So the way I see it at this point, I really think that unless, you know, barring like major injuries or serious random stuff, I really think that we can kind of call preemptively this Blues season a success in terms of the expectations of this being an evaluation year. I guess if you were going into it hoping playoffs, then that probably looks a lot different. But by my definition, I have been looking at this as an evaluation year. And I really think that they've been succeeding in a lot of different ways. And I think standing pat helps the future and the present, and it's the lowest risk move, obviously, to no reward. But at this point, like, I don't really know that I need to see a ton more out of this team, you know, unless they make the playoffs. But even then, like, I think that this is the best way to do it, is to see if they can with the guys that they've got.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, low risk, no reward, but like the reward kind of is, you know, you're not ruining your chances of a playoff run this year, and you're also not ruining your chances of a successful future by selling away or you know, giving away all of your picks and futures and prospects and things like that. So I mean, it sounds like we're sort of on the same page here. We expect the Blues to really implement this strategy of staying the course, standing pat. Yeah, do you think that's the Note News opinion here?
It seems likely, given like Rutherford's tweets and just everyone talking about the Blues, and I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if they didn't make any trades. I wouldn't be shocked, but I would be like a little surprised if we didn't see them do something. I think they'll be like really light sellers, really, if that makes sense. I think
Like
they
a
will.
Torpo or a Tex.
Yeah, like a Texier, maybe a Faxa. That might be like more than light based on what it could do to the team. We'll talk about that here in a sec. But I think I think they'll, I don't know, like sell something away because really the
Shooter,
hot streak,
perhaps.
yeah, Suitor, something like that. The hot streak, as we've said, didn't come quite soon enough that I think they were sort of made their mind up on what this team was and what they wanted to do with it. And so I think the hot streak may have, you know, reduced the amount that they'll sell, if that makes sense. But like I think they're still gonna lean seller. I wouldn't be surprised if they bought a little. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do anything. But right now I'm thinking they lean sell just at like just a touch. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I I think they're gonna stand pat, but I don't really have a way to like disagree with you and say that it's super analytical. Just I really think that Doug Armstrong likes to win, and
Yeah,
Texier
for
at
sure.
least gives you a nice bench piece, and he's signed for another year after this, so maybe he wants to talk himself into like Texier as a fourth liner next year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
potentially. I think this is a good segue into talking about some specific players here. We have talked in recent episodes about this a fair bit. Um, there have been like a surprising amount of Blues names in trade rumors and um, in sort of trade talks, I guess, if like trade reports, I guess. I think it could be good to talk about which players could be on the move and which are definitely not, based on some recent indications. I think it would be great if they could find a home for Falk, like we said, but it seems like that's more of an offseason kind of move. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think let's have the Radek Faxa discussion because yes, I can see them making that trade. I understand the argument for that being potentially the most likely trade that they make, but I think that they might convince themselves into bringing him back next year. Now he's a UFA, and so um, or he's an impending UFA, and so there would still theoretically be able to bring him back if if he hits the open market, um, sign him to a new contract, something like that. But um, I mean, why don't you sell me on why you think he is gone? Like you've said it a couple times, but I think it would be good to sort of tie it into this discussion as well. Like, what is it about Radek Faksa and where this team is at that has you convinced that he's on the move?
Just that I think definitely he's a player that teams would be looking to acquire. He sort of really fits the mold as like a bottom six help, that a Florida or someone like might think would be able to put them over the edge. And I mean, let's take for example the deal that went down earlier today,
Yeah.
and look at Trent Frederick. Wow, I don't know why that was so hard to say. Frederick this year has been playing center for the Bruins, and his birthplace is St. Louis, Missouri. I can't believe I didn't have that in my book. He's a St. Louisian.
Hmm.
Frederick this year has played in 57 games, had 15 points and a negative plus minus rating, but I think has a reputation of being an okay forward. He's got good size at 6'3",
Yeah.
and 221. So Frederick is a depth center that went for a second round pick that Stan Bowman so expertly flipped Philip Broberg for rental Trent Frederick. But he went for a second. He went for a second round pick. Again, 15 points, 57 games. Radek Faksa, 11 points, 50 games, 6'3", 215. Same size, very similar production, but better defensively. And his second round pick is like not a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like insignificant. Maybe that is just what I'm looking for. Is not an insignificant piece to have. Like second round picks, Jordan Kyrou was a second round pick, that is and we don't have one. And Doug Armstrong really loves trading his second round picks, but hey, if that's what it takes to get a Philip Broberg instead of Trent Frederick, I'll stop. Then like that's a really important piece to have. I don't know if I just feel like Faksa has less of a career resume than Frederick, so I don't know that he would return a second. But even like a third for Faksa is still really valuable versus like paying him, what would it be, like 1 point something million for the rest of the season. And yeah, you would need to fill that center role that would break up the WTF core. You'd probably put Texier at center, and then that fourth line probably doesn't become as big a strength. But even then, I do think that's the biggest case, is that the WTF line has brought so much fight to this team, and actually probably is part of, I think, arguing against myself here was how much they got deployed last night against Dallas. There were several like coming in from the break shifts where even the commentators were noting that the WTF line was like back out on the ice, playing a decent amount of minutes. And that's been a really big part of this team's identity. So for those reasons, maybe we don't see Faksa traded, but if you do, you could see a return like a second round pick. And I mean, that's it. Again, it's kind of like a win-win. I don't know the way I see it. That's because that's a hugely significant asset for someone that we acquired for future considerations versus you just get to let that line that has been so good to this team play for so long.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would be a little surprised if they got a a second rounder for Faxa. I think maybe if they package in something else with them, I don't know. I think Frederick has a bit of a better reputation, but I think that is like a fair comparison just based on who the players are and especially how Faxa is performing this season, like you just broke down. I mean, one question I've got is assume they trade Faxa away, right? What like they aren't very deep at the center position already. Like who moves into that role? Like would it be Nathan Walker or would we see like Matthew Joseph play some more center? Would they try Tex again? Would I don't know, like
I
anyone
could see
else?
any of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I could see all of those being possibilities. Yeah. Um,
I mean, is it crazy to say that they trade Faxo away, then the season is like probably a wash just because of how much stability he provides, and then when he slots out, like who else slots in? It makes things more complicated. Like I don't know. What do you think?
I do kind of disagree with that. I do think that even trading Foxa means that they're doesn't mean that they're like out on the season. Um, I because it's only one piece. At the end of the day, he has been our fourth line center.
Yeah.
I don't know that any team trading their fourth line center would call themselves out of it. I think it would definitely make it harder, but I still think the team could still rally and fight,
Yeah.
despite that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like they have been great defensively on one hand, but they have also been atrocious offensively on the other hand. But I mean, they are a fourth line, and they're not out there to score goals necessarily. But yeah, I think that's all fair. I think we should talk about some other names here. Pavel Buchnevich, we've talked about him a little bit. Others have as well. I don't think he's going anywhere. Um, so his current contract that expires at the end of this season. Um, as a part of that, I believe I'm trying to find the details for that. Um, he had, I thought before this season it was like a no trade list. Certain I can't remember how many it was. Um, but as a part of his contract extension that he signed over the offseason, part of that was a full no trade clause. And under the current CBA, that no trade clause applies to the last year of his current contract. So he has to approve any trade to anywhere, and I just don't see that happening. Plus, he's looking better, and like we've said, people are overreacting on Pavel Buchnevich. Like he's going to be fine, and I'd be really surprised to see Doug Armstrong give up on him already. Um, Colton Parayko, that's not happening. He is a core piece, and people are just like finally starting to realize who Colton Parayko is. It feels like I don't know. Do you remember when people thought that his contract was an overpay?
Yeah, yeah.
Funny times. Now it's an underpay. Like he's playing like a much better a much better player than what he's being paid. Jordan Bennington, that's not going to happen. Like the Blues are not going to trade Jordan Bennington this week. Joel Hofer's not ready. I think that has been apparent from some of his recent games. I think he can get there, but uh, I don't think he's ready to take over that number one spot. Um, Braden Shen, though, I think can be a little bit more of an interesting discussion because while I would be surprised to see him traded away, he continues to be in trade rumors. Most recently, linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are a notoriously not very deep team, and that has been like a big reason for struggle, especially among their forward group. Right, they've got those fantastic four forwards up top between Marner, Nylander, Matthews, and Tavares, but like beyond that, there's not much, and so I think they're looking for some depth. I think Craig Berube would love to have Shin on his team again, and I think they're looking for some toughness, some grit, and Shin brings that for sure. So he continues to be in trade rumors, but do you think he's really going anywhere? Like, what's your take on these rumors and how legit they are?
No, I don't think Shen's going anywhere. Again, I think this stretch of play has solidified Shen on this team. I already didn't think he was going to get traded.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't think the return would really make sense for this team's timeline. Plus, the center core is so thin already. And now that from what we've seen, I really don't think that Shen is going anywhere. The Berube link is there, but also like Shen was involved in that fight famously in 2019. So that technically you could spin that both ways. I think just so many reasons it doesn't make sense. I think that's just such a hard contract to move. He's the captain, and the only times that we've lost a captain are sort of when we knew it was going to happen with O'Reilly and Pietrangelo. Mm-hmm. I guess Pietrangelo wasn't maybe a little bit more ambiguous, but you kind of got the sense, when a deal didn't get done before into the season that he was going to be outbid. Yeah. And O'Reilly, we all knew was getting traded. So yeah, I am fully on the Shen is not getting moved. I think it doesn't make sense from Armstrong's perspective because the return would not be good, and it just makes your job so much harder. And I think it doesn't make sense from the Blues' perspective because he's such all the comments from the players recently too have really cemented to me that I would be shocked at this point if Brayden Schenn got traded because
he's so
they've got his back.
Yeah, for sure. He's so central to their success, like you said. He's so central as well to the clubhouse dynamic, team culture, all that. Really sets the example for this team. I think they're probably still listening, but I'd be willing to bet that the price is too high for any team to really bite. I agree. I don't think he's going to get moved. I could see it happening a couple weeks ago. But yeah, just how good he looks on this team and how good this team looks around him lately, I think, like you said, has solidified the fact that I don't think he's going anywhere. We mentioned Armstrong's comments from a little ways back around the time of the Saad contract termination, where he said you have to start chipping further and further up, and we were like, uh-oh, like Brayden Schenn, they're coming for you. Well, since then they've been playing well, so why would he continue to chip further and further up? Because the goal was to get them to play better, and well, that's what they're doing, and he's a big reason for that. I think what I've learned from all this is that Schenn has a lot more respect around the league from other teams, and than I expected. I knew he was well liked and well respected, but the fact that there were so many teams in on him and probably willing to pay a fair bit for him was a little surprising to me. Pleasantly so, just based on some of his recent seasons, but he looks like vintage Brayden Schenn again this year, and so obviously there's a lot of interest, but yeah, like you, I don't really see this happening this week, really. Any other players that you wanna highlight here?
I think we've touched on them all. Of the big names, I think we both agree no one's going. And then young guys like Neighbors and Bolduc, I would only expect to be used in an acquisition, and we've established the Blues are not making in a big acquisition, and we've established that's not happening. And then Foxa, maybe Texier, maybe Joseph, maybe Sunquist, Walker, Torpo, maybe one of those guys, or a Suitor. But like, I really would be surprised if the Blues are super active.
Yeah. So they've got one game between now and the trade deadline. They're playing in Los Angeles tomorrow night. How much impact do you think the result of this game has on their plans for the trade deadline? Like, a lot of times you see people saying, and someone said in the chat, like if they win the next game, or the result of the next game could convince them one way or another. But like, how much impact do you think the result of this game will have on their plans?
I actually think that I kind of agree that it could have a pretty significant impact.
Yeah.
Just if we see this play continue, and they really handed it to the Kings in the last game, can they do that again? I think there's hope that they can.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it actually, like, if they have another dominant performance, maybe we do see a small acquisition or something, or maybe they do hold on to Foxa versus if they lose by 2 or 3 goals, maybe Fox is on the move somewhere. I think there's a chance that it does actually have an impact, though.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree. It would be like almost preferable. No, it would be preferable for them to get to play like Anaheim too. That's the next game, but it's at 10 p.m. that night, so it'll be just after. Like, it would be so great to see them, how they measure up against a good and then a bad team, just to get a little bit more sample size there. But yeah, no, I think it could have a big impact, and I don't think they're going to wildly change their plans based on the results. But I think you're right. Maybe they would decide we want to keep Faxa, or maybe they decide we probably don't have it. Like, the Kings are good, but they're not like one of the elite teams in the league, and if we can't hang with them, then like what are the chances of going on an extended run here? But no, I agree. I think it could. But yeah, beyond that, Anaheim on Friday, LA again on Saturday. We'll get real used to playing the Kings there, but the next time that we plan to stream will be Sunday, unless there is a deal that goes down, and we probably be back a little bit sooner to break that down. But yeah, I think that just about does it. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the best way to help us out. We're almost to 300 subscribers, so help us get there. Like this video if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow and rate. And then if you want to follow along with us and all the work that we do, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. But yeah, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Note News. We'll see you next time. And as Matt in the chat said, let's go Blues, baby.
Let's go Blues. Stand pat.